Today you are living the life of an Ottoman Janissary. From a stolen child, to a blade in the empire's hand, to being wiped out in a single night by the very sultan you swore to serve. I was born in a small Christian village in the Balkan mountains, the son of a wheat farmer. Outside there were church bells. Inside there was the black bread my mother baked. Back then I thought life would always be this way. People in the village said that vast empire to the east sent men every few years to take away the strongest boys. Whenever my mother heard hoofbeats, she would hide me behind the woodpile. Back then I did not understand what she feared. When I was 7, the mounted officials came to the village all the same. They called it the blood tax. Household by household they registered the boys and took them from Christian families to give to the Sultan. My father knelt and begged and was kicked aside. An official squeezed my arm and looked at my teeth, recording me into the register like livestock. My mother chased after me weeping and was held back at the village edge. As they lifted me onto a horse, her cries grew fainter and fainter. A line of children was roped together and marched east, walking a full month. At night we huddled for warmth. Some cried out for their mothers, some tried to slip away toward home, and by the next day I never saw them again. At last we reached Istanbul. The walls rose higher than I could see, and the market crowd spoke a tongue I could not understand. Clutching the hem of my tunic beneath that enormous gate, I understood for the first time that home was beyond return. First they placed us with Turkish farming families to labor and learn the language, to eat their food and learn their ways. Within a year I could speak fluent Turkish, while my old name was forgotten clean away. They had me convert to Islam, kneeling toward Mecca 5 times a day. At first my heart still held that little church at the edge of my village. But after kneeling so long, even my mother and father's faces began to blur. The promising boys were chosen for the new army barracks, and I was one of them. The instructor said that from now on we had no home. The Corps was our father, the Sultan was our master, and the blade was our life. Life in the barracks was hard as stone. Before dawn we drilled at wrestling, archery, and lifting heavy weights. Do it poorly, and the whip came down. My hands blistered and bled, and I told myself through clenched teeth that to survive I had to be more ruthless than the rest. The instructors taught us the musket, a new weapon rarely seen even in Europe at the time. I fired it 100 times before my aim grew steady. The smoke stung tears from my eyes, yet that iron tube in my hands gave me confidence for the first time. The Corps forbade us to marry or trade, only to be soldiers wholly. We ate from one great pot, and the whole Corps treated that huge bronze cauldron as its very heart. No one was allowed to touch it the least bit. After enduring several years, I was at last formally enrolled in the Janissary Corps and given the tall white felt cap and a curved sword. The moment I put on the uniform, I realized I had grown into the very likeness of the men who once seized me. The first time I marched out of the city with the army, the townsfolk lined the streets to watch our column. Drums thundered, banners blotted out the sun. Wedged into that long file, I felt a sense of belonging I had never known. We pushed deep into the heart of Europe to storm fortress after fortress. It was the first time I saw true war. Cannon blasted gaps in the walls, and amid the shouts of slaughter, I gripped my blade tight. On the day of the assault, I followed my comrades up the siege ladders. The brothers beside me fell one after another. I did not dare stop, only climb, and the moment I crossed the wall I was drenched in other men's blood. Only after the fortress fell did I understand how close death had been. That night I sat trembling against a broken wall, and a veteran handed me a piece of bread, saying the first time is always like this. Get used to it, and you become a true Janissary. Battle after battle, I learned to weave between musket and pike, learned when to charge and when to fall back. My name began to be remembered in the Corps, and my scars grew more numerous as well. Once our commander was caught in an ambush, and I led a dozen brothers to fight our way through and shield him out of the encirclement. Back in camp, the general clapped my shoulder and said, "A man like you is bound to command troops one day." I was indeed promoted to officer of a small unit, with dozens of men under me. Once I had been chosen to become a soldier, and now it was my turn to drill the newly arrived boys. The look in those children's eyes was exactly like mine had been. Pay was issued in the corps by merit, once every 3 months, handed out publicly by the officers. The first time I presided over the payout, the great bronze cauldron was carried to the center, and the eyes of the whole corps fell upon me. Slowly, I came to understand the weight of this corps. We were the empire's sharpest blade. The Sultan relied on us to conquer, the court relied on us to hold order, and even the city's people had to make way when they saw us. In my 30s, I won a great merit and was summoned into the Sultan's palace to be rewarded. I knelt in that hall of gold and splendor, the closest I had ever been to that supreme master, my palms slick with sweat. After the reward, I had a home of my own in the city, a rich salary, and an entourage at my heels. Yet in the dead of night, I would sometimes think of that little Balkan village and find I could no longer recall my mother's face. By now I was a figure of weight within the corps. On campaign, I led the charge, and on triumphant return the whole city came out to greet us. My white felt cap bore a plume marking my rank, and wherever I went men bowed their heads. By this time the Janissaries had grown powerful enough to sway the affairs of state. The Sultan we favored we upheld, the one we disliked we forced from the throne. I sat in the corps council hall and watched my comrades decide the fate of a nation's lord. One year a new sultan tried to cut our privileges, and the corps mutinied that very night. We overturned the great bronze cauldron, the corps' signal, meaning that from this day on we would no longer obey his word. After the mutiny, the sultan could only bow his head, withdrawing the order and even adding more silver. Standing in the crowd watching our master yield, I felt a sudden chill. The blade, it seemed, was no longer content to be merely a blade. My power had reached its peak. My home was piled with spoils, and outside my door lined people begging favors. But I knew well that all of it was built on the corps' blade tip. As long as the blade stayed sharp, I remained a man of standing. The corps grew less and less like an army. Many of my brothers drew their pay by day and went off to trade or collect protection money by night, and fewer drilled with each passing year. I saw it plainly, yet no one was willing to be the first to speak. The world outside was changing. Europe's armies had taken up newer muskets and formations, while we clung to inherited old rules and refused to change. After several defeats, voices in the city began to whisper that the Janissaries were finished. The newly enthroned sultan was an ambitious young man named Mahmud. Several times he sought to reform our discipline and our system, and each time we pushed him back. I stood among those who opposed him and gave it little thought. The sultan yielded on the surface, but in secret he was quietly raising a new army drilled by new methods. When word reached the barracks, an old soldier sneered that he would not dare touch us. I nodded along, though an unease stirred faintly in me. I had grown used to my exalted life, used to the sultan's concessions. I believed this corps, the foundation of an empire for centuries, was untouchable. I had forgotten that even the sharpest blade has a day when its master casts it aside. On a night in 1826, the Sultan formally announced the creation of a new modern army, to disband and reorganize us old Janissaries along with it. When word spread, the whole barracks was like a powder keg about to blow. Once more we overturned the great bronze cauldron and launched a mutiny, as we had countless times before, pouring into the streets with raised blades. We assumed the Sultan would yield first as always. We had never once lost this gambit. But this time was different. The Sultan was prepared. He raised the Prophet's sacred banner to rally the whole city, and the new army and the artillery loyal to him pinned us in the barracks square, their black cannon mouths leveled at us. The moment the cannon roared, I understood the tide had turned against us. Shells smashed into the packed crowd, the wooden barracks caught fire, and the brothers crying out to charge fell before me one after another. This is what the histories later called the Auspicious Incident. The Sultan ordered the Janissary corps utterly destroyed, and within a few days the elite that had ruled the empire for centuries was washed away in blood, with no one able to escape. By sheer luck, I survived that massacre, hidden motionless behind a broken wall. When dawn came, the square lay covered with my former brothers, and that overturned bronze cauldron sat pressed amid the heap of bodies, with no one left to right it. Notices went up across the city declaring the Janissaries traitors, and even that white felt cap became a mark of death. I buried my uniform, my curved sword, and my cap all in the earth, and from that moment I was a Janissary no longer. I put on the clothes of an ordinary commoner and fled Istanbul under cover of night. All along the way, I dared not speak of my past, fearing that one accent or one scar would send me to the block. My former glory had become a brand that hunted me toward death. I hid my name and settled in a small town far from the capital, scraping a living as a blacksmith. No one there knew I had once been the empire's blade. To them, I was only a quiet old smith with scars on his hands. The years passed one by one. The new army became the empire's mainstay, and the name Janissary was gradually spoken of no more. Now and then I heard young men mention that purge as a distant tale, and I only lowered my head and kept hammering iron. One night, I dreamed I was back in that little Balkan village, back before the oven where my mother baked her black bread. When I woke, my pillow was wet. I had not spoken my native tongue in decades, and even the sound of home was forgotten clean away. In secret, I dug up the curved sword I had buried all those years ago and hid it beneath the bedboards. In the deep of night, I would take it out and polish it, and the blade reflected an aged face, a face an empire had used and then thrown away. A child in the town often came to the forge to watch me work. He asked where the scars on my hands came from. I thought for a long while, and in the end said only that I had fought in wars when I was young. The wars were lost, and all that was left were the scars. My body weakened year by year, and the strength to hammer iron was nearly spent. Sitting in the sun by my doorway, I often wondered, a child who was taken away, forged into a blade, and then snapped, whose life did this even belong to? In my last years I sit alone by the window, the curved sword I dare not show anyone hidden beneath my bed, and beyond the glass an empire that long ago forgot the Janissaries. If you too feel this life is worth telling others, share it so more people can see. Do you think he was the empire's blade, or a prisoner of fate? Cast your vote in the comments.